Alpha Team report.
What's happening, Heather?
Alpha Team isn't responding.
Bravo?
Still nothing.
You lost both teams? Get a grip on this operation, Heather. That's bored. Green light, Fiesta.
Sir, I need more time.
We have no time. Are you going to give that order or not?
Sir, please.
You're too naive to see the truth. There's no bringing in Bourne. He has to be put down. And you obviously cannot do what has to be done.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to pick the laws, we enforce them. But at the end of the day, each and every member is to go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is August 10th, 2016. We're a little late because I had some issues at the beginning of the show, which were actually issues that I caused. One of the things that happened, and I don't know, I guess I like to share the issues with the audience as if you are a podcaster, or I wouldn't call this a podcast because I do it live, but it's basically everything is a live show and a podcast these days. But anyway, I connect to my computer through the internet, or not through the internet, but I connect my mixer directly to my computer, and my mixer wasn't all the way on, so it didn't connect to my main application, Spreaker. And then I started it again, and I should have turned it off and then turned it back on my computer, which I didn't do. So it created two shows. And then the third one, of course, the one I'm on now, and I just deleted them off of Spreaker, but I'll have to go out there and delete them off of the other applications. But thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen live on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, and to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and SoundCloud, as well as the next day on Stitcher and iTunes. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty and self-ownership, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom. Exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And if you'd like to call in, we'd be happy to hear from you. The phone number is 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or you can reach us via Skype, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send a contact request with your name and what you want to talk about, and we will accept it and bring you on the air. And check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which has links to all our Facebook pages. We actually have 4, as well as other social media. And every weekend I post the archives, so they're there as well, along with editorials, articles, blogs, all of those things. Original articles and editorials and blogs are there. And I'm working on, which I mentioned, a series, which I believe I'm up to either 5 or 6 parts on the war on drugs and why everything should go back to how it was before 1914. That was when they passed the first anti-drug law against opium or heroin. And then it just went downhill from there. So back then you could actually walk into a pharmacy or into wherever, grocery store. I know the Sears catalog would send you a carrying case with a needle, or it might have been 2 needles, and a morphine, which you could order from the Sears catalog. And I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, that's crazy and whatever. But that was the reality. And there's no reason why it shouldn't still be the reality. So that's a whole nother issue. But you can go to nonpartisanlibertyforall.com and find those articles and read my opinion on them. There is one specifically on opium, but there are other ones as well. And it will probably end up being like a 15-part at least. I mean, there's so many areas of drugs that I have to talk about. So far, we've talked about self-ownership in about 3 of the articles. One of them was in a totally different aspect than the first 2. The first 2 is like part 1 and part 2, and then the other one is a little different. And we've talked about opium, we've talked about Pablo Escobar, and I forget what the other article is about. But we also have an article about why all police are bad and the rationale behind that. So I didn't just write an article. I call them article/blogs because they're more of, it's written in an article format, but it's more from my opinion than in anything else. I'm giving more of what I would kind of say on the radio, but writing it down. And what I plan to do as well in the future is do some video blogs. So we have the show, we have articles, and I actually have 2 more that I'm working on that have to do with 2 of the shows we've done this week, or one we'll do tomorrow and the one we did yesterday. That's really where I got the idea off of articles I had started. So I'll finish those articles and post those as well. So it's kind of trying to give you the similar things, but in all different formats, so we can reach a broader audience. So you may be somebody that likes to listen to the radio show. To me, that's the best way, because you can turn the radio on and do other stuff and listen while you're driving, or listen while you're cleaning the house, or whatever you may be doing. But then you can read the article if you want. But of course, that requires, a lot more focus, but it gives you a lot more detail. In the articles, I get into a lot more detail than I get into on the radio. And then, of course, you can go back and reread it, and it's in an organized format and whatnot. And then what I want to start doing, and this will be hopefully in the very near future, is also doing video blogs on YouTube. And that way you don't have to take the time. So it would be like a 10-minute at the most video blog where I talk about something. So as opposed to listening to the 2-hour radio show, sometimes longer, and at some point I may go back to 3 hours. Really, the only reason why I cut the show was because of the fact that for sleep purposes, but I could go 6 to 9 Pacific time, but because I've been at 7 and for 2 years now, I don't know how that will affect the people that listen to the show. Although the majority of people that listen end up listening to the archives anyway, so I don't know how much a difference that it would make. But the idea is to give you various types of media and to have a blog, a video blog as well, so you could just watch, a 10-minute video and you get it that way. So I want to really give people different options is really the main purpose of all of that, is to give people those options. I'd also like to, before we get into our topic today, which we've talked a lot about in the past, it's one of the most important topics to me, and it's one of the reasons why I started getting active, is gun control. So we'll get into that and how, now you're not hearing as much as you would about gun control because all the news right now is about the election. Now you've heard some regarding the election, but that's about it. But once the presidential election is over, I think that's when, depending on who's president, but I don't think it will really make a difference, to be honest. But at that point, I think you will see some action, and we'll talk about what Hillary has already planned. Donald Trump claims, I support the Second Amendment, and that's bullshit to me. And I also believe that if you truly support I would say gun rights more than the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is just a written confirmation to tell people that, okay, everyone has these rights, but you, in theory, don't even have to document them. The right to self-defense is a right that people are born with, and we will go into that as well. But really, I see that after the election, it's going to become a big issue again. So, as I was originally saying, we've done a lot of shows on it, and we've done a lot of shows on it because it's important. I think it is, if not the most important issue, one of the most important issues there is out there. Because once guns are taken away, it's over. That's it. And despite what they say, it's about confiscation. It's about getting rid of guns altogether. And they've done that already in New York and California. So don't think that they can't do it. People have said that, well, they'd never be able to do it. And that's not true. And the reason why is, look at things now. If you look at things like just anything locally, I'm sorry, I'm trying to multitask here and delete these these duplicates before people get to them and end up, I had one shared before, and they shared the wrong one. So I want to make sure if they get shared from these other sites that they share the actual show. So I apologize for that. But you look at things now, obviously everything's done in a local capacity. You have a local police station. Now they have these local fusion centers. So it's not hard when you break everything down and assign different people to different jurisdictions. And that's basically what they would do. You do the same thing with guns. You either hire more ATF agents or start a whole new organization that's what they do. And they know who has guns and who doesn't. I know what I was told is that unfortunately, first of all, in Clark County, you had to register your handguns. The rest of the state of Nevada, you didn't. So all my handguns were registered, but if I buy any new ones, they won't be. But the gun, the people that you buy your gun from, they have that information, but they say that they keep a file. They keep it on file, but they don't do anything with it, and nobody gets that information. It's just kept like kind of manually on file. So, I don't know exactly how that works. If the government wanted to go to every gun manufacturer, not manufacturer, but every gun store and get that information, I'm sure they could. Plus, when a background check is done, they know whether it's a handgun or a rifle. So they at least have that much information, and I'm sure they're tracking that. And so that's enough to give them information that they know who has purchased guns and whether they have purchased a handgun or a rifle. So just like the NSA is collecting all this data, if you don't think they're collecting that, I mean, if they're collecting everything else, why wouldn't they be collecting that? And then you have, of course, all the states that require you to register everything. And those ones are easy because they have them. So in Clark County, it would be easy with the handguns because they have that information. And then with rifles, they could get it from when they did the background check if they documented that information, which I'm sure they did, even though they're not supposed to, from what I understand. Well, first of all, I don't believe in any background checks or any restrictions on guns at all. I've said this before, but just to again clarify that this is another issue that goes back to self-ownership. It's possession of something. Now, and this is what I don't get, because usually you have people on opposite sides when it comes to drugs and guns. There's a lot of people that support guns that don't support drugs, or are for gun control, but think drugs should be legal, or at least cannabis should be legal. And then you have people that think that are against any more gun control, but think that drugs should be illegal. So it's weird in a sense that people believe that, because to me, it's a similar concept. If you conceptually look at what is really going on in the situation. And what's going on is the government is dictating what you can and cannot possess. Now, in one instance, you use that substance yourself, or you could be selling it to somebody else to use it. And in the other instance, you use it yourself, but you would be, as opposed to drugs going into your body, bullets would be going into somebody else's body. Hopefully, you wouldn't be shooting yourself, and it would be in self-defense. But I don't believe in any restrictions on guns, period. And that's another thing that there didn't always used to be background checks. I think it was in 36. There was a law passed in 36. I don't know if that was there. That might not even been the background check law. That actually, I think that was way later. I gotta go back and look. I used to know rather recently, actually, when I researched those laws, and I probably even have it in some of my show prep. But I know there was a law passed in 36, and then at some point they had the Brady Bill, which was the 3-day waiting period, but they went to a federal background check system, but that is rather recently. I think that's in the past like 30 years. So, yeah, the same thing that I was talking about yesterday about people changing their views and it really being via the government. We had played, of course, and I'll play it again today. I really should have saved it for today instead. Eric Holder's brainwashing people on how they think about guns. And that's what the government did, just like they do with everything else, is that they brainwashed people on guns. And essentially, the access to guns totally changed. And all of these laws and what has happened is people bought into them. That's the problem, to me. The biggest problem is that people ended up buying into this shit. And the government, as I talked about yesterday, their ultimate goal being taking away all freedoms and controlling basically every aspect of your life. And guns is a big issue to them because, yes, they have a lot of weapons. They have more weapons than probably if you just count the police, I would say the police nationally have more weapons than the whole country put together. Although there are a lot of weapons out there. I mean, there's, I think, more guns than people, but nobody has, tanks and stuff like that. Maybe a couple people were able to somehow get an old tank or build something or whatever. But in general, they are way over militarized now, and as a whole, they have a lot more weapons than the people do. But it's the same thing. They were able to change people's attitudes. And that is the most fucked up thing, that you have all of these things. And and people don't realize it. You know, whether we're talking about drugs or guns or whatever, that they all existed without restrictions at some time in the history of the country. And with guns are more recent than even drugs. Now the crazy drug war is pretty recent, where they just went nuts with it. But the laws against drugs and even the initial drug war, they didn't call it that, but they arrested a lot of people after they passed the laws in the late teens, early 20s. So it's not like it wasn't going on back then. It wasn't to the extent that obviously it is now, or has been for 40, 50 years now. Maybe not 50, but like 40, with Nixon and kind of Johnson before he left. It had passed a crime bill, I believe, and it kind of led into Nixon and his drug war. And somebody had told me another reason why, and it was on the show. It was Ken Shorjan had given another reason for the drug war, and I can't remember. I know what Nixon had said, and he had said because of all the soldiers in Vietnam getting addicted to all these drugs. But Ken had given another reason, which sounded pretty realistic, but I can't recall the reason why. I'll have to think about that. But so you have, going back to guns, you have things happen, and it's like, again, you look at the same thing. Well, what changed that all of a sudden more people started using guns more, or did they? I guess you'd have to look at statistics and stuff like that. And Stefan Molyneux did a video where he kind of goes through those, but he only goes back to 1960. And it obviously, the homicide rate, I believe, did go up. And not just the homicide rate, but obviously the amount of people killed by guns. But then it's gone way down since the 90s. But it's fucked up how it's gone way down, but now they still want more laws. But what is it that you could say, okay, well, more people were killed, started getting killed with guns. But what caused that in the first place? Because I would say that there's always an underlying issue to that. And of course, government, the way it works is their solution is, well, pass a law. Let's pass more laws. And that's what they did. And they definitely did the brainwashing. You can tell in certain states the approach they have to guns, like in a state like Massachusetts, and I know from living there that the way that they treat guns, they almost present them as, not almost, they present them as something bad. And by presenting them as something bad, it attracts bad people to them, as opposed to presenting them as a tool. I mean, you have hundreds of tools that can be used to kill people, but they're not, or they are, but it's rare. I mean, do we have a fucking serious problem of people being killed with hammers? I'm sure there are people killed with hammers, but to be honest, we don't have a serious problem with people being killed with guns neither. If you look at the actual statistics, and usually what happens, and this is where people fail to look at statistics properly, is that you don't look at whether gun violence has gone down. You look at it, has the homicide rate gone down. So what they'll do is a country like Australia or England, when I don't know when they actually banned guns, how long it's been. I don't remember in my lifetime them having guns, but I never really thought about it when I was a kid. Does England have guns? You know, so since the point I actually was conscious of countries that are that have laws against guns or total bans against guns, or it's really hard to get them there, I don't remember England ever having guns. So if you look at a place that doesn't have guns, and England's just, I think, a different place. And it's hard to compare countries because it's culture and things like that, and circumstances and the way people are brought up and whatever, poverty. There's all these things, I think, that go into it that it's hard just because, oh, well, the country's from the West. Because it's a country from the West doesn't necessarily mean that it's comparable when you compare homicide rates. But what you would look at is not, did gun homicides go down? You'd look at, did homicides in general go down? Because if the homicide rate stays the same, what's the fucking point? That just means that people are killing with other things. From what I understand, in Australia, after they banned guns, crime went way up, and same with England, and because there were more robberies. I believe with Australia, and don't quote me on this because I'm not 100% sure, that the homicide rate later at some point did actually go up or stayed the same. So they turn it into a killing by gun thing, but really what it's about is, of course, if you make it harder to get something, there's going to be less homicides by guns. That's just, it's idiotic to think that there wouldn't be. If it's harder, if you make it harder to get something, yes, people will still be able to get them, but it will be harder, so there'll be less people using them. But they'll find other ways to kill people, and that's where, if it doesn't affect the homicide rate, then what's the point? And what they try to do is skew stats where they try to compare, hey, look, the amount of people killed by guns went down. Yeah, but robbery went up, rape went up, homicide stayed about the same. You know, if that's what you should be looking at. It doesn't matter if less people are killed by guns. Who gives a fuck how people are killed? It's the fact that they are killed that is the issue. And of course, taking guns away is taking defense away. And there's estimated numbers that there are like over 100,000 people that are lives are saved. I mean, I don't know that you can literally break it down that their lives that every life was saved, but in a situation where, you know, they were going to get robbed or something like that. So they could have been killed, or they protected themselves or whatnot, which is what, you know, 20 to 50 times higher than how many people are killed with guns. Let me actually do that in my head. About 20 times more than the amount of people that are killed with guns. And you can't count suicides. They love to count suicides because the majority, and look at this. This is an even more interesting statistic, that the majority of gun deaths are suicides. Unfortunately, I brought this up yesterday. Somebody that I had known that was a former co-host on the show, we were no longer friends from, I don't have to get into why, but I feel that they totally fucked me over, but that's irrelevant. I didn't actually, I think I just said that they died. Or no, that was in a post. I think I said that they died, but they had shot themselves. But if they didn't shoot themselves, they would have done it another way. So when it comes down to it, and it's unfortunate that that happened, and again, you know, I feel really bad for the family and everything, and I talked about all this yesterday, so I don't want to go into it again. But there's more suicide by gun than homicide, so that tells you something right there. So going back to this whole thing on self-ownership, it's, again, the same concept that you would apply to drugs, and why there's so many people that are pro one or the other but not both is surprising to me. You can, I guess both can kill you. It just, the circumstances are different. And plenty of people OD on purpose. You know, the statistics on drugs are so fucking skewed to how they want to skew them, because there's a lot of people that die because they mix multiple drugs. And they don't tell you that. They count it as, like when I had talked about opium, they were counting, you know, it as, say, a heroin overdose when it was heroin, cocaine, and a bunch of other things. Or it was Oxycontin and a bunch of other things. And then you also have people that, how do you know that it was accidental? How do you determine an accidental overdose? Seriously. Like, somebody may just want to get really fucked up and their tolerance is high and they take a lot of pills. And, you know, I know that police, when they investigate a death, and I don't even think they probably put that much effort into it any fucking way, but how did they know that it was just, you know, accidental and that it wasn't suicide? Because that makes a big difference too when you're talking about all these deaths by drugs. Because government media wants to, of course, follow what they're told, and skew the fuck out of things, really. And guns and drugs are two things that they do that with a lot, especially guns. So, it is, I think it's 65-35, the percentage of people that commit suicide. So you can't count that. And that's based on like one of the recent years, like 2014 or 15. You can't count suicides as, well, if a gun didn't exist, they wouldn't have killed themselves. And the way guns are looked at is totally different from everything else. I want to play this. This is like a 48-second clip from Stefan Molyneux. And a lot of the shit that he says, he fucking pisses me off. But I like some of the stuff he does. And some of the stuff when he does calls and stuff like that is entertaining. But he makes a really good point here. So let me play this 48-second clip.
If you are for gun control, then you are not against guns, because the guns will be needed to disarm the people. So it's not that you are anti-gun. You'll need the police's guns to take away other people's guns. So you are very pro-gun. You just believe that only the government, which is of course so reliable, honest, moral, and virtuous, should be allowed to have guns.
Hi everyone, Liberty Doll.
Sorry, I actually cut that in the middle, so let me go back to where I thought it was over, because it sounded like he paused there. So let me go back to, I was at 30 seconds, and...
So it's not that you are... There is no such thing as gun control. There is only centralizing gun ownership in the hands of a small political elite and their minions.
So I think he makes a great point there that, yeah, there really what you want to do is you just want to take it away from people and give them to the government and police and the government. We've talked about this before. It's not just the police that are militarizing. I mean, every government agency has a department, if not the whole agency, that has a armed unit or armed, whatever you would call it, I guess, armed division. And that's been pretty recent that they're gearing up for something. So obviously they want to take the guns away from the people, and that's what I was saying. Right now, all the focus is on the election. I do have some clips which I'll play when I take a break from Hillary and Donald Trump, and we'll talk a little about the comment that he made that was taken as he wanted people to do something to Hillary, and I don't know, it's just ridiculous. I'm not a Donald Trump fan. I think all this bullshit, and I was listening to a radio show today of somebody I can't fucking stand, that Wayne Allen Root. I hate arrogant people. I do. I don't know that I hate them, because I don't care enough to hate them. But that's one of my, like, I hate the word pet peeves too, but that's one of them, is people that are on the radio and that are arrogant, or people in general in life that are arrogant. And I worry about coming off arrogant because I'm shy or whatever. And, you know, like, for example, say I'm at work and I walk by somebody and don't say hi or something like that, or, you know, say it where they can't hear me. Or I used to think about that in like high school. Or, you know, I don't talk to somebody and maybe they think that it's because I'm arrogant or I think I'm better than them or something like that. And that's not the case at all. It's more than likely because I'm shy, or I could be in a bad mood or something, but usually it's more of that. But when it comes to arrogant people, especially people. What's even worse is arrogant people that don't even have anything to be arrogant about. At least, and it's not okay to be arrogant when you have something to be arrogant about, but at least if you have something to be arrogant about, okay, like if you're a really successful celebrity, whether it's, sports, and I would call them celebrities, actors, musicians, whatever. So this Wayne Allen douche, who I don't know how he got a show, but he got a show. He talks about all his appearances and how great he is. And I was on this national show today, and my book's coming out, and my book is so great, and you're going to love it. And it's just all this shit. It's one thing being confident, and that's fine. And it's another thing being arrogant. And he's, I actually seen him at a party. This is how, I guess, low he is on the totem pole, because if he's so famous and important, why would he be at a party that I was at? Who am I? And this was a couple of years ago too. And he was talking to one of my friends that she ran for Congress. And I felt like he was hitting on her, because he just kept talking to her. And I don't know if she really wanted to talk to him or what. I don't know. But I kind of felt bad, because I could hear him monopolizing the conversation, and I heard him on the radio before, and I knew he was a douche, and he's a douche in person too. So anyway, he doesn't have anything to be arrogant about. Like, well, I wrote books and they were on the New York bestseller list and whatever. And it really, I'm not saying it's easy. Like, I could write a book and be on there, because I don't think that's the case. But it's not as hard to get on there as you think. It's really not. It's like with records now, where nobody buys records. So like the number one record, only has to sell whatever, like 50,000 copies for the week, or 30,000, or I don't know what the exact number is, but it's nowhere near what it was, for example. So it's like that with books, that if you, especially now, I'm sure books have gone way down. I mean, it's an accomplishment. I'm not going to say it isn't, but it doesn't make you, some great fucking genius or something. And I don't even know, he's been on Fox News. He was terrible. I heard him on there talking about Obama, that he went to school with him. He sounded like a total fucking liar. Anyway, I'm going off on this motherfucker, and he lives here too, unfortunately. So I was listening to the show, and he's like in love with Trump too. He had said how I was like the first person to start liking Trump way before everybody else, and Trump, and I love the police, and but he did get the Libertarian nomination for president one year. And he talked shit about the Libertarian Party, but it still has his announcement of his show. The Libertarian conservative, he doesn't know what libertarianism is. Actually, I don't think anybody does anymore, because libertarians and conservatives are a lot different. So you can't be like a libertarian and a conservative, but whatever. I'm neither. I don't define myself. But anyway, my point was that somebody had called up, talking about Trump, and how, Trump is out for our interests, and he's going to make such a difference, and all of this shit. And I talked about this yesterday, how, one, I don't think he's going to get elected anyway. And if he does, it's only because he made a deal and is controlled by the powers that be. And he Like I said, I think he's a fucking clown. But this is how people fucking talk. They really believe this bullshit that I was talking about yesterday, that everything's gonna change and whatever, and it's insane. So anyway, going back to, I'm kind of all over the place right now, but going back to self-ownership, this is a human right. You have the right to possess whatever you want. Because not allowing you to possess it, first of all, it's pre-crime. It's really what it is, because you haven't done anything with it. It's, well, you can't have this weapon because it's too dangerous and we don't trust you to have it, we the government, and we're not going to allow you to. But what that is it's an instrument of self-defense. And one of the basic principles of self-ownership, owning yourself, is also the right to defend yourself. And in that right to defend yourself, you have the right to use whatever you want to defend yourself. And that includes guns. And I don't care if you're a felon or, okay, I wouldn't give guns to people that are in jail. But after you get out, then, and off of probation or parole, and this is a whole nother issue, but the whole system, injustice system, is all fucked up anyway. So, not that means that I'm saying if somebody's on parole that they should be able to get a gun, but the system itself is just so fucked up, and I need to really do a show on my ideas on the justice system, but I don't know everything. That's the whole thing too. When you say I don't believe in government, or I want an organized society, but I don't want it run by a government, I want it run by the people, and it should be based upon the principle that you can do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt anybody else or their property. Now, that doesn't mean I have all the answers of every little fucking thing and how every little thing is going to work. And people expect that you do. They're like, well, what about this? Well, who's going to build the roads? And I could go and point out all the problems with the government now, but that's okay for them to have all those issues. Well, what are you going to do about this? Well, obviously they're not going to do anything. It just stays how it is, but that's okay. But the fact that myself, one person, doesn't have all the answers to what would be the solution to a real self-government, which means that you can't make, besides natural law, you can't really make any laws or anything unless everybody agrees to it, because you can't force things on people. But how that's going to work with every little thing, I don't know how it's going to work with every little thing. That's why there's other people with other ideas as well. And I have a lot of thoughts on how a lot of things would work. And then I take ideas from other people and merge those in as well. But no, I don't have all the answers, and nobody does. And when they fucking created the Constitution, they didn't plan out every little thing. Well, what if this and what if that? And that's the whole thing. When the Constitution was created, it didn't work that way. But now it's, well, what about this and what about that? And you have to have the answer to every little possible scenario and anything that could happen, which is ridiculous. But anyway, So self-defense is a human right, and so is the right to possess whatever you want. And I know there's so many things that people would say, well, what about a tank or a nuclear bomb? And how many people are going to be able to, one, get them or afford them? And, you know, I know, what about all the billionaires? Well, I would see it as central banks would go away. So would all of these existing billionaires. And currency would have to be backed by something, probably gold and silver. But I'm not going to get into a whole explanation of how I see society working without an actual centralized government. What I will talk about is the way things are now, the unfortunate way things are now, and how we are in a lot of trouble when it comes to guns. And even drawing a line. Where do people draw their lines when it comes to guns? If they do gun confiscation, I almost said something else. I mean, how far are there people that would actually let the government go into their house and rummage through it and take their guns? Because I'm telling you right now, I would not do that. Now, if that makes me a criminal, I guess it would, then, you know, it is what it is. But I know at least what I believe is that everybody needs to draw their own line, really. How far are they going to go? Or how far are they going to let the government go? How much are they going to take? Are they going to go to the point where the government dictates every aspect of their life? Are they going to go that far? Are they just whatever the government does, they're going to obey? Or do they have a line, well, if the government ever did this, because in Nazi Germany, it didn't seem like many people had lines. And there might have been people, I'm sure there's stories where there were people that fought back. But what happened was it got to a point where it was too late, where if you fought back, you had no chance. And I'm not advocating, and I never have, any violence or any, you know, there are people talk about revolution and overthrowing the government and stuff like that. I don't believe in that. I believe heavily in self-defense. And there could be things that happen in the realm of self-defense where, unfortunately, people get hurt. Although, again, that would be an unfortunate scenario. But as far as people, you know, that talk about having taking over the government or going to war with the government, it's the same thing. Then you have a bunch of the same, you're in the same situation that you were in, or maybe you're in a worse situation. And then not only that is a bunch of people had to, you know, get hurt and die to get to that point. No, I believe in getting people's hearts and minds, and through things like non-compliance, trying to dissolve as much as possible by not using it or not complying with it or those type of things. But I do believe the goal of the government is to ban all guns. And they've said it before, too. And I actually have a clip of a Hillary surrogate or whatever those people are, or a delegate, actually saying that. And you had Luis Gutierrez from Illinois. He's a representative or a senator from Illinois who Piers Morgan, I believe it was on his show. Before his show got canceled, he was doing like guns every night. Like he was, I'm going to get guns banned. And that's what my show, I mean, they should have changed the name of the show to Let's Ban All Guns, because that's what he was really doing, was every night hammering away at, we need to get rid of guns. We need to get rid of guns. Every night, that was the topic of the show. And I'm not even exaggerating. It was just different people. So Luis Gutierrez was asked a question, about handguns. And he's like, yeah, we may have to go after handguns too, or we should go after handguns too. When they realize that more people are killed by handguns, a lot more, that's when, they'll go after handguns. What it is they want to convince you, and they want you to believe them, of course, that, no, we only want to do this. And then they do that, and then they go to the next thing. Then we want to do this. But we only want to do this. And then they go to the next thing. So they keep doing more and more until they ban guns totally. And then they do things like I brought up yesterday about being labeled a dangerous person and not being able to get a concealed carry permit for never being person was never arrested. The only incident was a post on Facebook and being questioned about that post. And it had to do with talking about police that were killed. And it was a couple years ago. So if you're in a shall issue state, if you've never been arrested, never been convicted of a felony, whatever the criteria is, and it isn't much, they shall issue. That's the whole reason why they call it shall issue. And they still did that, which is crazy. So they talk, and they're talking about these lists. So they're using, terrorism. And I actually have a clip from Judge Janine where she believes that even if you're being investigated for terrorism, and this is going to include, this is the whole thing. It's going to go to people that are considered anti-government, and they'll say they're investigating them, or they'll put them on a list, and then you won't be able to get a gun. So what they'll do is one of the things they'll try to do through lists and things like that is limit the amount of people that can get guns. So it will get smaller and smaller. And by doing that, they'll be able to wipe out a whole bunch of people off the list, or in America that can't get guns. They did the same thing actually with marijuana, medical marijuana. And I believe even in Nevada, this is the case, that if you are a medical marijuana patient, at least this was the case at one time, you could not own a gun, which is crazy. But that's what they did, was they used the fact that, oh, you're a medical marijuana patient, so we're going to use that. Not every state did it, but a lot of states did, that we're going to put you on a list and you can't own a gun. And that's where they have the database comes in too, where they want to have the database where if they consider you mentally ill. And what do they base that off of? First, they say, well, it's if you have ever been committed in a mental hospital, or if you have, you're schizophrenic or something like that. But how far does that go? And that's where you don't know. It may go to the point where if you go to your doctor and say, hey, I've been having anxiety, or you were depressed before in your life, years ago, that, oh, well, now you're in this database. And with Obamacare and now having all electronic medical records where they have access to all your medical records, it makes it even worse because they just merge that with the rest of your records. So I'm going to take a break and play some of the clips I have that have to do with, I definitely want to play the clip about banning where the Hillary surrogate or delegate or whatever was caught on tape saying that ultimately they want to ban guns, as well as Hillary talking about her plan, and we'll talk about that, where she wants to go in and sign a bunch of executive orders. Of course, they want to do whatever they can to go after guns. And none of the stuff that they want to do would have stopped any of the things that they talk about, which is even more fucked up. And I think some of them, I really do think that were false flags that the government was involved. I mean, you talk about some of the things that families like the Clintons and the Bushes have done. And in a couple weeks, we'll talk about Mena, Arkansas, when Bill Clinton was the governor, and how they were flying in planes full of cocaine, and he was totally aware of it, and I'm sure he was getting money off it as well. So we'll be right back after this. Oh, I'd like to send a shout out and a big thanks to Brad Miller, who on Twitter, who's been, I guess he's a fan. He must be, because he's been tweeting a lot of positive things about the show, and as well as Ellen's show also. The Illumination Hour, which airs every Monday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. So go and check that out. But I'd like to thank him. I mean, I've thanked him on Twitter, but I'd like to thank him on air for all of the positive feedback and all of the support. Not just positive feedback, because I'm sure, Twitter, you can only write a certain amount of words. I'm sure there'd be some, critiques there, but at least in, promoting the show and telling people about it and in tweets, I really appreciate that, because we don't have a lot of money to go out and advertise. And that's, at some point, I'm going to put some more money into the show. I mean, I put all the money into the equipment. I pay, of course, the website, the applications I use, and all of that. The ones that aren't free. There's a couple that are free. And I'm 100% self-funded. I fund everything, and I don't make any money. Of course, you can always donate at Nonpartisan Liberty for All. But so anyone who helps to promote the show or market the show, it really is a big help. So if you like the show, please tell people about it, and post about it if you can. And I really appreciate that. So just wanted to give a shout out to him. So check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. Check out some of the articles. And if you like them, always click like. The same with YouTube. If you listen to the show on YouTube and you like it, click the finger thing, as I think it helps in where your show comes up as far as, when you search for something, that it comes up higher. So that's helpful as well. So anything like that anybody can do to help, I am really appreciative. I'm just happy to have listeners, to be honest, but anything that anybody can do. And like I said, if you can donate, hey, that's great. If you can't, that's no problem either. And at some point, if I can continue to get the amount of listeners up, and we'll be adding a show in September, which I think is going to be a great show. And the listeners, the amount of listeners that I think we'll have to that show and what we can do with that show, I think the sky's the limit on that. And I think that will also help my show as well as Ellen's show, the Illumination Hour, which is great. It's just getting it out there. A lot of people don't know that she's on. So if they did and they heard the show, that's where they might listen. So it's really just exposing or getting the word out on the shows. And I think the show we're going to do next month, start next month with Dale Brown of the Detroit Threat Management. I always want to say Threat Fusion because of the Fusion Center. The Detroit Threat Management Center is going to be a great show, and a lot of people know who he is, and I think he has a built-in fan base already, but he'll just, I think, word of mouth once, even talking to him. I had him on the show before. He's going to be on again next week. By then, we'll have the specific details of the time and what we're going to talk about on the show, and what he's going to talk about on the show. It will be his show, and he has plenty of interesting and fascinating stuff to talk about. So I think that will really help the network. So anyway, we'll be right back after this. Again, check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. Like all our social media pages, there are links to all of those. There are also links to all the places that you can listen to the archives, as I know different people go to different sites or have accounts on different sites. So those are all listed there, as well as the archives themselves are posted every weekend. So if you want to listen to old shows, you can listen to old shows on there, or the week before. Or if you listen on the weekend, I try to get it done Friday night, get the week shows posted. So we'll be right back after this. Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
Hillary Clinton continues to push aggressively for more gun control in the country, and she is making promises that if she is elected president of the United States, she would take certain executive action to ensure that gun regulations become law in the U.S. Now, just to give you an example of what she's pushing for, she would like universal background checks for anyone who's looking to purchase a gun. She's in favor of rolling back legal immunity for the gun industry, meaning that if something goes wrong with a gun, that gun manufacturer is no longer going to be immune from a lawsuit. That's what that means. And also legislation to keep firearms out of the hands of domestic abusers. Now, under Clinton's plan, background checks would be expanded to close loopholes for private sales at gun shows and online. Clinton, if elected president, would use executive action to deem any individual selling a significant number of firearms in the business in order to hold private sellers to the same rules as gun retailers. Another thing that she's planning on doing, which I think is the most common sense legislation imaginable, she wants to close certain loopholes when it comes to background checks. One of them was actually taken advantage of by the Charleston shooter. Okay, so she also proposed closing the so-called Charleston loophole, a reference to the shooting in June at a historically black church in Charleston, South Carolina, in which the gunman was able to purchase a gun despite having a criminal record because if a background check takes longer than 72 hours, a gun dealer can just sell the weapon without the completed check.
So let me give you an example of the second point there that Hillary Clinton's making. So a family...
So let me kind of talk through this as we play it. Now, first of all, that 72-hour thing is there for a reason. A lot of times it just doesn't come back for whatever reason, and the person doesn't have a criminal record or anything like that. So what that would do is stop people that are totally eligible based on the ridiculous laws to get a gun, but they never get it because now it's up to the gun dealer. They have, and really it's the government's fault, you know? So the government is saying, well, we didn't come back, so, you know, you can't. What she wants to do is, for the government's fuck up, stop somebody from getting a gun. So if you don't want that to happen, then speed up your fucking background checks. You know, 72 hours is long enough to wait. And if they haven't come back by then, it's up to the dealer whether they want to sell the gun. Now, if she wants to change that, then make sure they get back by 72 hours. But it sounds like what she wants to do is say, you can't have the gun until they come back, and they may never come back. It just how they are. And I don't know that how many times the gun store is going to call. The other thing is, and they get it wrong. You'll hear in this. Maybe I should wait till we get to that part. But as far as suing gun owners and manufacturers,
whose daughter was killed in the Aurora, Colorado shootings, sued the people who sold the weapons. Okay, saying, hey, you should have done a better background check on the guy. If you had, James Holmes is clearly mentally ill, and you shouldn't have sold him all of that weaponry, all that ammunition, all different weapons, etc., including the armor-piercing bullets that actually were so powerful, they went through the movie theater seats, and after going through the seat, hit their daughter in the head, and as they describe it, splattered her brains all over the floor.
Okay. I'm very sorry for what happened to that girl, and that guy was a fucking nutcase. Who knows his demeanor when he went into the store? I think there's a moral obligation there not to sell someone a gun if you believe that they're going to do something that they shouldn't be doing with it, if they're going to murder somebody. But I'm sure he did not, and people have done this. Gun store owners have done this before. See, what they're trying to do is they want to put gun stores out of business. They want to put manufacturers out of business, or make it as hard as possible for them to do business so they will go out of business. But to hold them liable, as long as they followed the law and did the background check, is ridiculous. Now, if they didn't do a background check, they would be charged with a crime, selling a gun without doing a background check. So there's no way around it. They have to do a background check or it's illegal. And to be able to sue them when they followed the proper laws. I mean, this is like the whole thing about, you know, bars getting sued. We've gotten into a society where nobody wants to take responsibility for their own actions. And regarding the movie theater seat, first of all, because he talked about the bullets, movie theater seats are made out of shit. I'm sure the hollow points would go through those too. But or Full Metal Jackets, because actually hollow points kind of, you know, go in and just go all over the place. But both would probably go through that anyway. But again, I'm sorry that they had lost their daughter, but it's not the fault of the gun shop that they had lost that their daughter's dead. It's the fault of a lunatic. It's not the fault of guns. It's not the fault that guns exist or gun manufacturers. It's the fault of some fucking lunatic assuming that that's what happened. And who really knows? He seems like a fucking, what do you call it? Like a MK Ultra type Manchurian Candidate person, really. But that aside, it's ridiculous if the gun shop follows the law to be able to sue them, regardless of what is being bought. I mean, they don't see people that know nothing about guns are always the ones to speak out about them. And they don't understand. This was my analogy, that having a whole bunch of different guns, or having a quote unquote what they would call an arsenal, is like having a bunch of G.I. Joes for a kid. And maybe kids don't know about G.I. Joe anymore. Actually, no, they came out with the movies recently. So G.I. Joes meaning like, oh, I want all of when I was a kid, I wanted all the G.I. Joes. But technically, they're pretty much like the same. They're all little figures. This one looks different, and this one looks different. But, I mean, what do I need fucking 50, 60 G.I. Joes for, really? But I wanted all the G.I. Joes. It's a similar thing where you want all these different guns. You want to take them to the range. You want to shoot different calibers, different brands, different types of guns. And, different calibers. I think I said that. So it's the same type of thing where, yeah, I got excited that I got a new gun and to go to the range and shoot it because this gun is totally different than this gun. So they don't understand that. So if you're somebody who's going to a gun shop and you buy a bunch of different types of guns, and I don't know how many he bought. I don't think he bought that many. I think it was like 3 or 4. And if you buy armor-piercing bullets, which I've never even heard of, so I don't know what the fuck he's talking about when he says armor-piercing bullets. I've heard of armor-piercing bullets, but not armor-piercing bullets that you can buy at the store that are actually called armor-piercing bullets. So I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. And in Nevada, basically everything is illegal. Plus, I bought all my bullets online anyway. And the only bullets that I was aware of were, they have different kinds of points on the... I wouldn't consider myself an expert in guns, but I know more than the average person. Like they had the I forget the name of them, where like they had a green point, and this was a tipped compared to. But the main bullets are the hollow points in the Full Metal Jackets, but there's other ones too. But I don't know what he's talking about when he's saying armor-piercing bullets.
Okay. So what happened was they sued, they lost because they have the gun manufacturers and the gun sellers have immunity. And then they said, okay, because of Colorado's laws, which by the way is super...
How would that be though because of immunity? Now, first of all, I know that a lot of states did that because this is what's happening is people buy guns and then they sue the gun manufacturer. So how is the gun manufacturer culpable because you took their fucking gun and did something with it that you shouldn't have done? You know, someone could, it's the equivalent of taking a car and running people over and suing the car company or suing the fucking dealership, which is ridiculous. And I don't know how that can even be, people can get sued for that. But what happened was a bunch of states had to pass laws that said, hey, you can't sue them for that because this is ridiculous. And it's not immunity. The way he says it, like, oh, they're immune from lawsuits. No, it's basically the same thing as, you know, cars don't have to be immune because nobody sues them. If people were suing car companies for people doing crazy shit with cars and killing people with them, it would be the same thing. Nobody else has to do that because nobody else sues companies for what people do with their fucking products.
Disputable, but they don't have that much money. They're just an innocent family whose daughter got killed there, right? Mm-hmm. All the gun rights advocates, et cetera, came in with crushing amount of resources against them and said, since you lost, you have to pay their attorney's fees.
Yeah.
So now they owe $200,000 to the people who sold the guns who killed their daughter.
Well, first of all, on the surface, that sounds bad, right? But in reality, the gun store, I don't know how much money the owners had or whatever, but if you own a little gun store, you're not a fucking millionaire. So who knows how much that they had to pay to defend themselves from this frivolous lawsuit, and it could have drove this guy broke. So twisting this around, they shouldn't have sued in the first place. It's ridiculous that the case even went to court. And if you're going to sue somebody for something frivolous like that because of what the guy did with it and the gun store followed all the laws, you know, I feel bad that, I mean, that's a lot of money. But at the same time, the guy that owned the gun store, he could have filed for fucking bankruptcy for all we know. These are not millionaires. Now, if you're talking about the manufacturer, they have probably a lot more money. But gun stores are small little fucking, a lot of them, the majority of them. I mean, the gun stores that I know of, these guys aren't fucking rich. Far from it.
So Hillary Clinton says, no, we're not going to do that. You're not going to get immunity. Now, look, you might, even if you don't have immunity, you might still win in court. You might say, hey, look, it wasn't my fault that James Holmes got this gun. I did the best background check I could, right? Mm-hmm. And I did what was legally mandated to do. Doesn't mean that that family automatically wins or anybody automatically wins. It just means you should be able to go to court and contest the case.
Yeah.
This says, no, I got immunity. I can do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
I mean, we get so outraged at diplomatic immunity, but we've created, by the way, not for any other manufacturer. The only people who have immunity,
because nobody,
is first of all, class, the gun.
First of all, that's not true, and you're a fucking idiot. I hate the young jerks, and this guy's not even young. He's like 45 years old, and he looks it. He's a jerk off. His name is like Jerk. At least it's almost spelled that way. It's like Cirque is the way it's spelled, but that's not how they what they call them. But first of all, pharmaceutical companies have immunity. Okay, when it comes to vaccines, I know 100% that they have special courts, and they pretty much have immunity. And that's a totally different thing. That's their vaccines could fucking kill you or do something to you or do serious damage from their vaccine. To me, they should be liable. Not like this, where a guy buys a gun and then he takes that gun and does something fucking that he shouldn't be doing with it and goes and kills people. So that's not true right there. The other reason is that nobody sues people for things like that. Like I mentioned cars. Nobody sues car dealerships because somebody runs people over with their car. Nobody sues knife manufacturers because somebody stabs somebody with a knife. So they don't need it. Because if they didn't have it, gun shops would all go out of business. And that's what she wants to do.
Gun manufacturers and the gun sellers are like, nope, I can do any goddamn thing I like if it leads to the people dying, which I know it does because that's what guns do by definition.
They can't do anything they like because they still have to follow the law and do a background check. So get your fucking facts straight, jerk off.
You can't sue me.
So I like that Hillary Clinton has taken this issue. It's an important issue, and I like that she's pushing
because you're a
aggressively.
fucking
I think
cunt.
that she's being sincere in feeling passionately about this, and it's a great thing. But there's also a huge political component to this because one of her competitors, of course, in this election is Bernie Sanders. And there's one issue where Bernie Sanders, to be quite honest, is a little sketchy, and that's the issue of gun control.
This was, I believe, aired before Hillary had clinched the nomination. But I thought it was important because she goes through or they discuss what she had said regarding what she's going to do about guns.
So years ago, decades ago, I should say, he voted against legislation that would roll back legal immunity for the gun manufacturers and sellers, for those in the gun industry. And so people have been criticizing him a little bit about that. And I think Hillary Clinton...
And you know what? There's still plenty of places where they can get sued, first of all. As far as I know, and I could be wrong, there is not a federal law that protects them. If there is, it's recent. From what I understood, at least for the gun manufacturers. So there may be a federal law for the gun shops. I don't know. For the manufacturers, or there may be a recent federal law. If there is, it's in the past 5 years. But there were a lot of cases where gun manufacturers were getting sued because obviously they have all the money, whereas the gun shops, most of these people are just, small businessmen. So when it came to that, the states were the ones that were doing it, that were saying you can't get sued in our state. So I think that's what moved some gun manufacturers. Now, they could have passed a federal law, and I'm not aware of it, so that's possible. But if they did, it's recent. Like I said, in at least the past 5, maybe a little more than that, but no more than 10 years. Because I remember reading about cases where people were sued. And I believe that they actually won as well in certain states. So I know Nevada is one of the states that passed a law that you can't sue the gun manufacturers. I didn't know they were suing the gun shops. That's even worse because you're suing small businessmen. But that's what they want to do is she wants to put them out of business. And that's what I've been saying is that what they want to do is attack them from all sides. So whatever they can do to chip away at the amount of people that can get guns or the amount of access to guns, like Obama, when they had and I believe they still do, sanctions on Russia, what's one of the first things they do? Well, you can't import, Russian AK-47s. and the bullets as well. He was trying to get rid of lead. The Russian bullets actually suck. They're the fucking what are they made out of? I had some of them. It's like metal shit. I forget the specific. Was it copper or something? I don't know. My gun would jam every time I used those.
Clinton is basically grasping this issue as her way of kind of differentiating herself from Bernie Sanders.
So I want to say a couple of things about that. Bernie Sanders says, look, I was representing Vermont, which is very rural. People like their guns there.
Yeah, supposedly Vermont is the safest state in the country, and they have the freest gun laws, them in Arizona. Now, really, when you go through it, what, according to Molyneux statistics, which are backed up, it looks like there's really no correlation between if a state has loose gun laws or tight whatever gun laws, because you can look at certain states that their gun laws are more lax than another, and they have higher homicides, and then you can look at ones that don't. Now, I don't know, though, if that was homicide by gun, but it's still, it's some states you look at, and yes. I mean, I would say in general that it's safer in states that people are able to protect themselves. But as far as looking at the statistics, you can find states that have not many gun laws besides what's on the federal level, that where it's easier to get a gun, but they still have a lot of homicides. So basically what he kind of showed was it doesn't really matter as far as what the gun laws are, that it's more the people, and people are going to kill people with, if they weren't killing them with guns, their homicide rates would probably still be the same. It's just, it's a fucked up place. So I'm going to skip the rest of this because we really don't need to talk about Bernie Sanders. But here's Donald Trump's, what he said about Hillary Clinton. Actually, I'll play that later because I want to talk a little about that, and we'll probably go over tonight, maybe till 9:30, but that 9:30 at the latest. Here's the clip regarding the Surgeon or the Hillary delegate or whatever that says that really what they want to do is ban guns.
So I've been saying for a very long time that the Democrat Party is one of gun confiscation. Now we have yet another one of these undercover videos. And the thing about these undercover videos before I go forward, why is it always people get caught in these undercover videos? Like, does not anyone understand that they could be on camera at any point in time, or do they care? Right? I think during this video that you're going to see, the person that was talking to the person that's being recorded had basically said that you can't say certain things. You can only say it within company of trusted people. But who do you really trust, especially in the Democrat Party, in light of the whole WikiLeaks thing? I mean, how can you trust anybody, right? I mean, I wouldn't trust anybody from a Democrat Party with a spare lighter, let alone personal information, let alone anything that could implicate somebody in a criminal case. I think what you're about to see is indicative of what I've been saying for a very long time. When people talk about gun control, I mean, what does that really mean? All you're going to do is make it more difficult for an individual that's in a dangerous area to be able to acquire that which they need to protect themselves and their family. And many of these people don't have these same restrictions on themselves. As you can see in the video, people say, well, no, I don't have gun control. I'm not one for gun control in my own home, but I'll say you need gun control for yourself and your family, right? And it's really unfair because why do I have to be subject to the rules of a state that will not come out and protect me when I could just easily protect myself? I mean, if you call in the police during a home invasion, how long will it take for them to be able to get there? A lot of times they're just there to pick up the dead body and or write the police report. But whatever the people are going to do, they're going to do before the police get there. So when talking about common sense gun control, I mean, what does that really mean? You want to ban assault weapons? What is an assault weapon? And if you ban them, what's to prevent others from having them, right? Can't wave a magic wand and just make all the guns disappear. At a certain point, you're still going to have guns that are out there floating in the street. So how are you really going to stop that? By having, air quotes, common sense gun legislation or gun control. In this video, you'll see that that whole notion is BS, to try and confiscate guns. And the reason, in my opinion, they want to confiscate guns is to have more control over you. When you are dependent upon a person, they can pretty much tell you to do whatever they want to do. If you have independence, then at that point, you're able to stand on your own 2 feet and not be beholden to the state and whatever their desires are, right? And this is something I've been talking about for a long time. It's not a surprise to me that they actually come out and admit it. Now, of course, they're on candid camera. They don't know they're admitting it to the world, but they are. And I think that this video should be the nail in the coffin for anybody that's a gun control advocate. I mean, how do you sit there and support gun control when the people are openly saying that we want to ban guns, right? And if you want to ban guns, again, how are you going to ban the guns from the criminals? You can't wave a magic wand and just make all the guns disappear that are out there floating around the street. Just because a person can't go to a gun store and purchase a gun does not mean they can't go and get that gun with some other kind of means. You know, stealing it from somebody, bringing it in from a different country through Mexico, through the southern border, which is not closed, it's porous. Anything can pour through that border, guns, drugs, whatever they want. So the whole thing about gun control does not make any sense. Gun control is just for people that are blind sheep, that are being told whatever they want to hear by the Democrat Party. They want to hear that the Democrat Party will make them safer by banning guns. Like, that's really going to happen. People that don't take too much time to investigate what they've been told. They don't take too much time to really understand what they've been told by the mainstream government, as I call it. So I won't waste too much more of your time. I'm going to go ahead and roll that tape. And after you get done, I mean, you tell me your honest opinion. Do you think that this tape is faked? Now, if it's faked, man, they did a pretty good job in faking it, right? Maybe you can do a little bit of research on who that person is in the video. I've not actually looked into her past or, you know, found her on LinkedIn or anything like that. But if you're able to do it, give me your findings in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for now. So go ahead and check out the video.
Something that you would like to put on in your apartment or home? I'm actually
Oh no!
We would put the sign right out here in front of this office.
But not your home.
No.
You know, so the concern is, oh, there's no gun. We just kick down the door. Worst thing that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, then you're basically saying that you should have a gun in your house to protect it.
Yeah.
No, but there is. Yeah, it's so tough, right?
Banning guns, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm totally against it. And my husband is against guns.
Awesome.
My husband is now a registered Democrat. He wasn't before.
How can we ban guns? What do we have to do?
I don't know. It's hard because this country is split, you know? And all the money, the big money is with the NRA. But you know how you do it? You've got to get Democrats in office. Like, that really is how
And that'll help us ban guns.
You got to get enough people in there to vote the right way.
But we can't say we want to ban guns. So they're not going to, you got to like hide that.
No, right. You got to say you're going to have common sense gun legislation.
And then they can switch them and ban them all.
Well, and also if we can get a majority, if we can get Hillary in there and get a bunch of new Congress.
If we get Hillary in, do you think it'll help us ban guns?
I think everything helps, but I think unless she has the votes to support her in Congress and in the Senate, she's going to have her hands tied like Obama.
But Hillary would support banning guns, right?
For sure.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know what her position was.
Yeah, I think, well, she doesn't take And you saying you want to ban guns altogether are going to piss everybody off.
Right, so you can't do it that way.
That way.
Unless you're at a Democrat event where everybody agrees with you.
Right.
Yeah, I don't do that every day.
Right. I think that's sort of moderate. Like, well, we just want to have common sense legislation so our children are safe.
Yeah.
You say shit like that, and then people will buy into it.
All right.
Hi everyone, Liberty Doll here, coming to you from the fabulous state of Massachusetts, where gun control just got really real. I mean, not that it wasn't really real before, but now it's like really, really real. So for anyone who missed it because of all the, plethora of horrible, horrible things that have been happening in the world lately, last week, Attorney General Maura Healey in Massachusetts unilaterally banned all semi-automatic rifles, and a bunch of pistols too. Basically what she is saying is anything capable of accepting a detachable magazine. So what happened is Massachusetts has had an assault weapons ban in place since 1998. Really, it's just a carryover of the 1994 federal assault weapons ban. The 1998 legislation actually says that it will define an assault rifle by the federal language that was instituted in 1994. So this is just a carryover. It's the same exact law federally that we have by state. Now, last week, Maura Healey put out an enforcement notice to all gun manufacturers that they are not allowed to manufacture or sell any assault weapons in Massachusetts. And she announced this in an op-ed piece that she published, I believe it was in the Boston Globe. It was one of the Boston newspapers. And that's how everyone found out about this. That was the announcement, is her op-ed in the local newspaper. Now, she sent out this enforcement notice without any public hearings. There was no one that got to weigh in on it. I don't even think legislators were even in session when it happened. Regardless, no one knew about it, and legislators now are saying, well, hey, this was never brought up as a concern, so this is coming out of nowhere. Now, what exactly has been banned is unclear because in Massachusetts we have a list of approved firearms. Typically they're approved if they are not considered assault weapons, if they have a loaded chamber indicator, an external safety, things like that. But there's like a list, okay, of what is approved to be bought and sold in Massachusetts. So Maura Healey is now saying that any rifle that is a copycat or duplicate of an assault weapon is banned, and ownership of one, like ownership of an assault weapon, is considered a felony. So as of Wednesday, a whole bunch of the gun owners in Massachusetts are considered felons. Now, what she is calling a duplicate or a copy is a duplicate or copy is a prohibited assault weapon if it meets one or both of the following tests. One is a semi-automatic rifle or handgun that is manufactured or subsequently configured with an ability to accept a detachable magazine, or two is a semi-automatic shotgun. So there is a similarity test and an interchangeability test. So basically what she's saying is that the similarity test is any rifle that has been produced without any of the evil features, which ironically enough, she says, oh, well, so if you don't have the evil features, it doesn't actually affect the lethality of the weapon. So she's essentially saying that the assault weapons ban of the prohibited features doesn't work and doesn't affect at all the function of the firearm, which gun owners have been saying for years. So under this test, if it has the same firing ability or operating system of a previously banned weapon, it is now banned. Or if any of the parts are interchangeable with previously banned weapons, then it is now banned. So we have this going on, which says basically every semi-automatic rifle that isn't bolt action, anything that isn't a revolver, combined with the fact that there's no list, sounds like basically everything is banned. So a bunch of people are up in arms. There was a rally at the State House this past weekend newspaper reports are saying hundreds of people showed up. I heard reports from people that were actually there that said closer to 5,000. Either way, gun owners in Massachusetts are a vast minority. There was a senator that has put forth legislation to strip Maura Healey of her power involved in firearms sales as Attorney General. And it does have the backing of several other senators, but the current legislative session ends July 31st before they go on break and start focusing on re-election campaigns, so it's probably not going to get anywhere. The local Gun Owners Action League has been on this. They've contacted the NRA, and there has been people speaking out, senators as well as GOL members that have made the local news, talking about how this I can't even call it a law, this whatever it is, sets a precedent that laws can be changed and reinterpreted overnight without any approval and just, wipe out whole things unilaterally. So that is definitely a concern. But I mean, she put out this information, this op-ed, this enforcement letter to all the gun manufacturers, and then has basically been silent. So we have no idea what's going on, really. She did say that if you owned any of these weapons before Wednesday, that even though you technically fall into the felon category, no one will be prosecuted, because she says, oh, well, you probably thought that you were buying it legally. You didn't know that you were being illegal, even though none of those things were illegal until Wednesday. But anyone going forward is not going to be able to purchase anything that even vaguely resembles anything on the assault rifle list, anything that has a detachable magazine. So I don't even really know what's going to happen to the ammo. I do own an AR-15, mass-compliant AR-15, an AK-47, a couple other things just for fun. So, and Massachusetts does have a record. Everything here is registered. It's backdoor registration, but there's registration. So there is a list of who owns what and where they got it and when. So there's no talks of confiscation at this point. And Maura Healey says there's going to be no talks of confiscation, but who knows, really. So that is the Massachusetts update. Don't come here, ever. Don't move here. Or if you're here, just move. Get out. Especially if you like guns. So that is it. Thanks for watching. I hope this was informative. Don't forget to like, subscribe, etc.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in. Username Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. That last clip, and I can't remember if I talked about it or not. I remember I brought it up saying that I couldn't remember if I talked about it, and I briefly mentioned it, but I tried to find an update on that, and I really couldn't find anything. So from what I understand is technically the law was already on the books that you couldn't have this bullshit assault rifle. There is no such thing. It's a government-created word that they use to classify what they deemed banned. And it would be if it had, say, 3 of these and, pistol grip, shredded, or the, what the fuck do you call it? It's getting late. The shredded barrel or whatever, so they would have a list, and it sounds like the law was still on the books, but it wasn't being enforced, and that as an Attorney General, she suddenly is not only enforcing that, but interpreting it in a way that you cannot own a gun that I guess it would be required, but that has a detachable magazine. So that eliminates probably 90% of guns, because handgun-wise, all that would leave is revolvers that I can think of. I'm sure there's like one-shot Derringers, but I mean up-to-date guns. And then shotguns, I guess, would be legal because they don't have not semi-automatic shotguns, but pump shotguns and bolt-action rifles would be the only things deemed legal. So I hope. And see, this is where, when I talk about drawing the line and those type of things, I don't know why anybody would want to live in Massachusetts, even though most of the people I'm related to live there. But if somebody they're saying they're not going to go after it, is from what she was saying, but if for whatever reason a cop is in your house and sees it, or I guess you can't go out and shoot it anywhere if you have any of these banned guns. It's crazy. So as far as drawing the line, this is where I would say to people that you need to stand up and say, no, we're not giving up our guns. And if you try to take them from us, we will fucking defend ourselves. And that's it. And to just the whole thing with interpretation of law, this also brings up that, and laws are written by lawyers for lawyers, essentially. You have the business of law, the whole fucking injustice system, not even the whole injustice system, the whole government is set up this way and based upon lawyers, basically, and how they write law, interpret law. Most become most of the Congress people, although not all of them, are lawyers. And then you have the judges, the prosecutors, all lawyers. So they write laws so they can also interpret them in the way they want to interpret them. So they write them in lawyer speak. They force people to hire lawyers because nobody can understand anything. They do that on purpose to give the business to the lawyers, but also to confuse people and to make it easier for the government to convict somebody of a crime because they can interpret laws any way they want to fucking interpret them, even though they do whatever they want anyway. The bottom line is the government does whatever they want. So we'll have to see what happens in Massachusetts, but either, take your guns and leave, or stand up and say, look, we're not giving up these guns. And whether it's a group of people get together and say we're not giving up our guns to hopefully deter the state from gun confiscation, or even arresting somebody if they happen to find a gun. I mean, there's there's two ways they can go about it, of course. Gun confiscation, which I guess they're saying they're not going to do that. And they could arrest people if they happen to come across any of those guns. So hopefully, and from the article I read, that people are protesting and making it known that they're not too happy. So I don't advocate violence in this situation, but again, where do you draw the line here? And you're talking about the state that really started it all is like the worst state when it comes to guns. It's crazy. When it comes to freedom, really, Massachusetts is fucked up. That's why I had to escape. And hopefully nobody ends up getting arrested or in any trouble because of this. And, you know, this is where jury nullification comes in too, but the way that they're able to kind of brainwash juries because judges tell them they have to vote based on this and this and this, and they kind of shape their understanding of being a juror is shaped by the judge. And I think people are actually scared to the point where they're scared. And if they don't know about jury nullification, a lot of times I think they'll find people, because if you look at how many people are found guilty, the percentage of people that get arrested, I'm not saying that go to trial, but just that get arrested and charged with a crime and end up in a situation where they are found not guilty is probably, like less than 1%. It's probably that low. It's crazy. Well, let me play this clip from Trump that everybody, I guess, is flipping out over, saying that he supposedly threatened Hillary. And again, I hate Trump. I do. I can't stand him. He's an arrogant fuck. And it doesn't matter who becomes president. It's all the same shit. We talked about it yesterday. But this is just kind of ridiculous, the way this was interpreted, that he's... I heard somebody on CNN say this, that it's one of the worst things ever said or something by a presidential candidate. They're just trying to, more hype and more viewers and all that shit. And also, I think that the government media is trying to elect Hillary. And I think that's the deal that was made 8 years ago, and I'm pretty sure that's where it's going. But, you never know. It could be Trump who made the deal with the powers that be, and they'd rather Trump in there. But Hillary's a better benefit to the establishment, although you have so many people that think Trump is the savior that if he got elected, they might back off as far as protesting and stuff like that. So I guess they have to weigh their options there. But, in the big scheme of things, what are people going to do? Nothing. I mean, it's not really going to make a difference to how the people react. So it would benefit them best if Hillary gets elected. Hillary's going to go after guns. Hillary's for the TPP. But of course, if they made a deal with Trump, then they could have him do all the same stuff. But I think that because of the things that he said, that in order to keep that illusion of freedom, he's going to have to do some of the things that he said. Whereas Hillary, they got her where she'll do whatever they need her to do. Not only that, is the amount of probably dirt that they have on Hillary is just a mountain of fucking dirt. But here's Trump's clip. It's only like 15 seconds.
And by the way, and if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But
so I took that really as just saying that the Second Amendment people can protest and try to stop either those judges from getting chosen and approved, or before they vote, same thing, they can protest. But they took it as him saying, well, those Second Amendment people could, do something to Hillary. It's so fucking stupid. So I didn't take it that way at all. And they made a huge deal out of it, which I think is pretty fucking stupid. But anyway, one of the things that we went through what Hillary is supposedly planning on doing, and I'm sure she'll try to do more. But one of the things that Obama did, and he is the biggest fucking hypocrite, and here's a quote from an article from Democracy Now! That says the volume of, this is after his first 5 years in office, the volume of major deals concluded by the Obama administration in its first 5 years exceeds the amount approved by the Bush administration in its full, this is arms sales. I think I left that out. The volume of major deals concluded by the Obama administration in its first 5 years exceeds the amount approved by the Bush administration in its full 8 years in office by nearly $30 billion. That also means the Obama administration has approved more arms sales than any other U.S. administration since World War II. Now, most of these, of course, where did they go? Saudi Arabia. But the fact that, it goes back to what Stefan Molyneux said, you have nobody's for gun control. It's just where the guns, whose hands they're in. And I don't understand all of these people that supposedly, what I was talking about yesterday, it's so fucking frustrating too, that are actually that brainwashed that they think the system. First of all, before I even get to that, you have a contradiction right away. They say how dangerous it is, right? They say how it's, there's terrorism, there's this, there's that. And that since it's so dangerous, we need to take away everybody's guns. It makes no sense. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that it's such a dangerous place and and people are getting killed and police are getting killed and terrorist attacks are happening, even though there were no fucking... You had two people, and this is how they manipulate shit. So you had two people that were supposedly influenced by ISIS. And did the FBI talk to both of them or one of them? I know they talked to one of them. It's funny how, and maybe both of them, but it's funny how they always have some connection to the person who does something. And then it's, oh, they made a mistake. Oh, they did this, like the Boston bombing. And that's another part of that as to why I think there's a lot of information. I should write an article on it. There's a lot of information. That's just another small part, but that's part of it too. I mean, the connections to the CIA and the FBI and all that. So it's ridiculous. But the fact that you want to say how dangerous it is on one side and then say, but let's ban guns on the other side, it makes no sense. But government doesn't make sense. So that's a huge contradiction there. Now, the other thing that, and I can't get actually, you know what? I can get the clip to play through YouTube, and then we'll round up the show. But Judge Janine went off on this whole thing on the lists, and it's so ridiculous, because you have no probable cause, no nothing. This is another way that the government can take away your rights with no probable cause, and the executive branch can just, pass an executive order on it, which I thought they did. But if you're on the any of these lists, and that if you're not even being on a list but also being investigated, so if you're being investigated as a terrorist. Now, her main thing is, of course, Muslims, but she's not just talking about Muslims. She's talking about anybody that would be considered a terrorist as well. So it would apply to anybody. Well, whether she's talking about anybody, it would still apply to anybody. So let me play this, and it's just it's ridiculous. And this is another way, again, that they're trying to find, basically the government's trying to find as many loopholes as possible to limit guns. And the more they find, the better for them. And of course, you find more and more loopholes. Then as a whole, it's like, okay, well, we stopped this amount of people from getting guns just based on all of these fucking loopholes we found. And then from all these executive orders that we end up passing, that we find. So here's Judge Janine. This is from June 18th of 2016.
Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Janine Pirro. Thanks for
Welcome
being
to
with
No
us
Justice.
tonight. Now to my open. It's real simple. You don't like America? You want to cheer as the World Trade Center comes down? You want to meet with a known suicide bomber? Okay. Then you've given up your rights at the altar of American freedom. If there's a terror investigation on any level, you lose your right to fly, your right to buy a gun, and your right to privacy. Any rights you had take a back seat to our national security. If you're on a no-fly list, a terror watch list, if you're under terror investigation, you have no Second Amendment rights. You cannot buy a gun, you cannot fly on a plane, period. We can't allow you to do this to us again, and we will not allow you to use our Constitution as a shield while you put our loved ones, our neighbors, and our nation in danger or worse. All right, folks.
So she's saying you can't use the Constitution as a shield, even though that's what it's there for, to protect your rights. And she totally ignores the Fourth Amendment and says, you know what, if you're under investigation, doesn't matter. No due process, none of that. It doesn't matter. You lose your rights. You don't have any constitutional rights anymore. She does say you're not going to go to jail or anything like that. But if you're on any of these lists, you just heard it. So she totally contradicts herself, and that's another thing that they want to do. And I thought she was actually a Republican, but and I guess she is, and that's kind of where she was aiming it more at Muslims, but it would apply to anybody. So anybody considered anti-government that was under investigation, or never mind under investigation, it put on a list because you said some anti-government stuff. Like if they took one of my shows and said, well, you said this, so we're putting you on a list. And I could very well be on some list somewhere. But I'm not going to sit there and fucking stay quiet. I'm not. These things are obvious. They're in your face. There's no fucking excuse to sit there and say that they're not happening. And in that process, let things turn to East Germany. And that's what people are doing. Because as I said yesterday, people are fine as long as they feel comfortable enough and they're under the illusion of freedom. Even if they're not under the illusion of freedom, but they feel comfortable enough where, hey, why am I going to ruin this? You know, I got a job, I got my wife, I got my kids, whatever. And why am I going to stand up? I'll just, I got it good enough where it's fine. But it's not going to be like that forever. You can see how the government is organizing. It's pretty obvious. And as I've been saying for the past couple of years, they're putting in the infrastructure. And where is it where you draw the line? Because they're going to go after guns. And I would suggest that you get what you can while you can. And you don't give that shit up for nothing. Because guns are even good as a deterrent when it comes to the government, because the government knows that there are enough people that are armed and do believe still, and I say still because so many people have changed their beliefs when it comes to things in freedom. And I don't mean people, more generations, like drugs and things like that, even with guns, even how they were able to get in background checks. And now that's just a normal thing. If you're against background checks, you're crazy. If you think felons should have guns, you're crazy. The same way you're crazy if you think heroin should be legal. All of these, that's not actually, I don't think there's as many people that would say you're crazy if you think heroin should be legal compared to if you think felons should have guns. But they don't even think about what you're saying. It's just the automatic reaction. It's like the brain has been people have been brainwashed to give that reaction of that's what you say. Like you automatically give a, like, that's crazy. How could you think that? You're nuts. The same thing about the police. If you talk about defending yourself against the police. Now, let me be very clear. I don't believe in, the people that attacked the police in Dallas and Baton Rouge, and I don't know whether it was one person or not. I don't believe in that. And I do value human life. And I think a lot of people don't think about the value of human life before they do things. But on the other side, there is self-defense. And I do believe that there is no reason why, because somebody works for the government, that you shouldn't be able to defend yourself against them. At the same time, I also don't believe that police should exist in the capacity they exist now, neither. And that I have a page on Facebook called End the Government Police, because I don't think police should have the extra rights that they have. That's why we have the problems we have. And I'll be talking about this tomorrow. So to kind of set up tomorrow, we'll be talking about Black Lives Matter, how they're actually connected to a whole bunch of communist groups, and that they're not getting to the issue of police and the power that they have being the problem. They're focusing on race. And really, it's been hijacked, and at the same time, it's like secretly a communist movement. And, the majority of people that march, I think, with Black Lives Matter are just regular people that don't even get into any of that. They're just marching for the people that got killed by the police. So, and I do believe that there's definitely racism when it comes to police. And, however, all races are being killed by police, and to just turn this into a race issue benefits the government a lot. And we'll go into that tomorrow in detail. So that's all I have for tonight. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, and we will be back tomorrow. Please check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. If you'd like to donate, please feel free. I'd love a donation, but if not, no problem. Listen to the Illumination Hour, 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern on Mondays. And, of course, my show Tuesday through Thursday, Nonpartisan Liberty for All, 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. And coming soon, in September, Dale Brown of the Detroit Threat Management Center, the creator, the owner, and the captain. He runs it as well. He'll be on next week, but he'll also be starting his own show next month. So thanks, everybody. Have a good night. So, yeah, the same thing that I was talking about yesterday about people changing their views and it really being via the government. We had played, of course, and I'll play it again today. I really should have saved it for today instead. Eric Holder's brainwashing people on how they think about guns. And that's what the government did, just like they do with everything else, is that they brainwashed people on guns. And essentially, the access to guns totally changed. And all of these laws and what has happened is people bought into them. That's the problem, to me. The biggest problem is that people ended up buying into this shit. And the government, as I talked about yesterday, their ultimate goal being taking away all freedoms and controlling basically every aspect of your life. And guns is a big issue to them because, yes, they have a lot of weapons. They have more weapons than probably the whole, I mean, if you just count the police, I would say the police nationally have more weapons than the whole country put together. Although there are a lot of weapons out there. I mean, there's, I think, more guns than people, but nobody has, tanks and stuff like that. Maybe a couple people were able to somehow get an old tank or build something or whatever. But in general, they are way over militarized now, and as a whole, they have a lot more weapons than the people do. But it's the same thing. They were able to change people's attitudes. And that is the most fucked up thing, that you have all of these things and people don't realize it. Whether we're talking about drugs or guns or whatever, that they all existed without restrictions at some time in the history of the country. And with guns are more recent than even drugs. Now the crazy drug war is pretty recent, where they just went nuts with it. But the laws against drugs and even the initial drug war, they didn't call it that, but they arrested a lot of people after they passed the laws in the late teens, early 20s. So it's not like it wasn't going on back then. It wasn't to the extent that obviously it is now or has been for 40, 50 years now. Maybe not 50, but like 40, with Nixon and kind of Johnson before he left. He had passed a crime bill, I believe, and it kind of led into Nixon and his drug war. And somebody had told me another reason why, and it was on the show. It was Ken Shorjan had given another reason for the drug war, and I can't remember. I know what Nixon had said, and he had said because of all the soldiers in Vietnam getting addicted to all these drugs. But Ken had given another reason, which sounded pretty realistic, but I can't recall the reason why. I'll have to think about that. But so you have, going back to guns, you have things.
Alpha team report.
What's happening, Heather?
Alpha team isn't responding.
Bravo.
Still nothing.
You lost both teams? Get a grip on this operation, Heather. That's bored. Green light, yes, sir.
Sir, I need more time.
We have no time. Are you going to give that order or not?
Sir, please.
You are too naive to see the truth. There's no bringing in Bourne. He has to be put down. And you obviously cannot do what has to be done.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to pick the laws, we enforce them. But at the end of the day, each and every member is to go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is August 10th, 2016. We're a little late because I had some issues at the beginning of the show, which were actually issues that I caused. One of the things that happened, and I don't know, I guess I like to share the issues with the audience as if you are a podcaster, or I wouldn't call this a podcast because I do it live, but it's basically everything is a live show and a podcast these days. But anyway, I connect to my computer through the internet, or not through the internet, but I connect my mixer directly to my computer, and my mixer wasn't all the way on, so it didn't connect to my main application, Spreaker. And then I started it again, and I should have turned it off and then turned it back on my computer, which I didn't do. So it created two shows. And then the third one, of course, the one I'm on now, and I just deleted them off of Spreaker, but I'll have to go out there and delete them off of the other applications. But thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen live on Spreaker.com and NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com, and to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and SoundCloud, as well as the next day on Stitcher and iTunes. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty and self-ownership, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom. Exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And if you'd like to call in, we'd be happy to hear from you. The phone number is 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or you can reach us via Skype, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send a contact request with your name and what you want to talk about, and we will accept it and bring you on the air. And check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which has links to all our Facebook pages. We actually have 4, as well as other social media. And every weekend I post the archives, so they're there as well, along with editorials, articles, blogs, all of those things. Original articles and editorials and blogs are there. And I'm working on, which I mentioned, a series, which I believe I'm up to either 5 or 6 parts on the war on drugs and why everything should go back to how it was before 1914. That was when they passed the first anti-drug law against opium or heroin. And then it just went downhill from there. So back then you could actually walk into a pharmacy or into wherever, grocery store. I know the Sears catalog speaks to me, and it's one of the reasons why I started getting active, is gun control. So we'll get into that and how, now you're not hearing as much as you would about gun control because all the news right now is about the election. Now you've heard some regarding the election, but that's about it. But once the presidential election is over, I think that's when, depending on who's president, but I don't think it will really make a difference, to be honest. But at that point, I think you will see some action, and we'll talk about what Hillary has already planned. Donald Trump claims, I support the Second Amendment, and that's bullshit to me. And I also believe that if you truly support I would say gun rights more than the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is just a written confirmation to tell people that, okay, everyone has these rights, but you, in theory, don't even have to document them. The right to self-defense is a right that people are born with, and we will go into that as well. But really, I see that after the election, it's gonna become a big issue again. So, as I was originally saying, we've done a lot of shows on it. And we've done a lot of shows on it because it's important. I think it is, if not the most important issue, one of the most important issues there is out there. Because once guns are taken away, it's over. That's it, and despite what they say, it's about confiscation. It's about getting rid of guns altogether. And they've done that already in New York and California. So don't think that they can't do it. People have said that well, they'd never be able to do it, and that's not true. And the reason why is, look at things now. If you look at things like just anything locally. I'm sorry, I'm trying to multitask here and delete these these duplicates before people get to them and end up. I had one shared before, and they shared the wrong one. So I want to make sure if they get shared from these other sites that they share the actual show. So I apologize for that. But you look at things now, obviously everything's done in a local capacity. You have a local police station. Now they have these local fusion centers. So it's not hard when you break everything down and assign different people to different jurisdictions. And that's basically what they would do. You do the same thing with guns. You either hire more ATF agents or start a whole new organization that's what they do. And they know who has guns and who doesn't. I know what I was told is that unfortunately, first of all, in Clark County, you had to register your handguns. The rest of the state of Nevada, you didn't. So all my handguns were registered, but if I buy any new ones, they won't be. But the gun, the people that you buy your gun from, they have that information, but they say that they keep a file. They keep it on file, but they don't do anything with it, and nobody gets that information. It's just kept like kind of manually on a file. So, you know, I don't know exactly how that works. If the government wanted to go to every gun manufacturer, not manufacturer, but every gun store and get that information, I'm sure they could. Plus, when a background check is done, they know whether it's a handgun or a rifle. So they at least have that much information, and I'm sure they're tracking that. And so that's enough to give them information that they know who has purchased guns and whether they have purchased a handgun or a rifle. So just like the NSA is collecting all this data, if you don't think they're collecting that, I mean, if they're collecting everything else, why wouldn't they be collecting that? And then you have, of course, all the states that require you to register everything. And those ones are easy because they have them. So in Clark County, it would be easy with the handguns because they have that information. And then with rifles, they could get it from when they did the background check if they documented that information, which I'm sure they did, even though they're not supposed to, from what I understand. Well, first of all, I don't believe in any background checks or any restrictions on guns at all. I've said this before, but just to, again, clarify that this is another issue that goes back to self-ownership. It's possession of something. Now, and this is what I don't get, because usually you have people on opposite sides when it comes to drugs and guns. There's a lot of people that support guns that don't support drugs, or are for gun control, but think drugs should be legal, or at least cannabis should be legal. And then you have people that think that are against any more gun control, but think that drugs should be illegal. So it's weird in a sense that people believe that, because to me, it's a similar concept. If you conceptually look at what is really going on in the situation. And what's going on is the government is dictating what you can and cannot possess. Now, in one instance, you use that substance yourself, or you could be selling it to somebody else to use it. And in the other instance, you use it yourself, but you would be, as opposed to drugs going into your body, bullets would be going into somebody else's body. Hopefully, you wouldn't be shooting yourself, and it would be in self-defense. But I don't believe in any restrictions on guns, period. And that's another thing that there didn't always used to be background checks. I think it was in 36. There was a law passed in 36. I don't know if that was there. That might not even been the background check law. That actually, I think that was way later. I gotta go back and look. I used to know rather recently, actually, when I researched those laws, and I probably even have it in some of my show prep. But I know there was a law passed in 36, and then at some point they had the Brady Bill, which was the 3-day waiting period, but they went to a federal background check system, but that is rather recently. I think that's in the past like 30 years. So would send you a carrying case with a needle, or it might have been 2 needles, and a morphine, which you could order from the Sears catalog. And I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, that's crazy and whatever. But that was the reality. And there's no reason why it shouldn't still be the reality. So that's a whole nother issue. But you can go to nonpartisanlibertyforall.com and find those articles and read my opinion on them. There is one specifically on opium, but there are other ones as well. And it will probably end up being like a 15-part at least. I mean, there's so many areas of drugs that I have to talk about. So far, we've talked about self-ownership in about 3 of the articles. One of them was in a totally different aspect than the first 2. The first 2 is like part 1 and part 2, and then the other one is a little different. And we've talked about opium, we've talked about Pablo Escobar, and I forget what the other article is about. But we also have an article about why all police are bad and the rationale behind that. So I didn't just write an article. I call them article/blogs because they're more of, it's written in an article format, but it's more from my opinion than in anything else. I'm giving more of what I would kind of say on the radio, but writing it down. And what I plan to do as well in the future is do some video blogs. So we have the show, we have articles, and I actually have 2 more that I'm working on that have to do with 2 of the shows we've done this week, or one we'll do tomorrow and the one we did yesterday. That's really where I got the idea off of articles I had started. So I'll finish those articles and post those as well. So it's kind of trying to give you the similar things, but in all different formats, so we can reach a broader audience. So you may be somebody that likes to listen to the radio show. To me, that's the best way, because you can turn the radio on and do other stuff and listen while you're driving, or listen while you're cleaning the house, or whatever you may be doing. But then you can read the article if you want. But of course, that requires, a lot more focus, but it gives you a lot more detail. In the articles, I get into a lot more detail than I get into on the radio. And then, of course, you can go back and reread it, and it's in an organized format and whatnot. And then what I want to start doing, and this will be hopefully in the very near future, is also doing video blogs on YouTube. And that way you don't have to take the time. So it would be like a 10-minute at the most video blog where I talk about something. So as opposed to listening to the 2-hour radio show, sometimes longer, and at some point I may go back to 3 hours. Really, the only reason why I cut the show was because of the fact that for sleep purposes, but I could go 6 to 9 Pacific time, but because I've been at 7 and for 2 years now, I don't know how that will affect the people that listen to the show. Although the majority of people that listen end up listening to the archives anyway, so I don't know how much a difference that it would make. But the idea is to give you various types of media and to have a blog, a video blog as well, so you could just watch, a 10-minute video and you get it that way. So I want to really give people different options is really the main purpose of all of that, is to give people those options. I'd also like to, before we get into our topic today, which we've talked a lot about in the past, it's one of the most important topics